This time on Engine Masters, 19 air cleaner combinations, one engine, some tableware, a handful of winners, and some hideous losers. This is Engine Masters presented by AMSOIL, and I can't imagine a hot rodder anywhere who isn't in for some surprises on this episode, because what we're gonna do is take 19 different air cleaner combinations, some of them mainstream, some of them really wacky. We're gonna run them all on this engine, and at the end of the show, we will rank them in order from least to most powerful. Now, this is an example where the old cliche is absolutely true. An engine is nothing but an air pump. And so what we're gonna be measuring is really the restriction of inlet flow and how that affects performance. The engine that we're doing that with is a 489 cubic inch big block Chevy. All you really need to know is that it makes 760 horsepower. So it's a big air pump. The reason that I wanted to use something that gnarly is so that we could actually tax some of these air filters and make them hit their capacity. The other thing is, this applies to you, because if you think about it, the 700 horsepower engine up at high RPM is a 300 horsepower engine down at low RPM. It's also a 400 horsepower, 5, 6. You get all those data points all along the way, so we're gonna be able to see what each filter is capable of. But you can't do that until you go through all the labor of putting this thing on the dyno, and then the fun of pouring in the AMSOIL, and then firing it up to find out which air cleaner is best. This is gonna be so much fun. I know what you're thinking. You're going, how can he possibly tie in an AMSOIL moment for a test of air filters? Well, here's the thing. Dulcich and I are both famous for running no air filter whatsoever. And when you do that, you get dirt through the engine and stuff, and your oil change interval shortens out because you literally get dirt in the oil. Whereas synthetic oil will extend your oil change interval. So you really want to run an air filter because you don't want to be changing your good synthetic oil more often than you would really need to. I'm gonna use the Dominator Racing Oil in this thing at 1030 because this thing is 13.5 to 1 compression and pretty stout. All right, first up, we're gonna fire up our engine and just run it with no air cleaner whatsoever so that we have a baseline to find out how bad these filters are.
We're good.
Are there any of them that'll make more horsepower than open?
Yes.
I'm going with Dulcich.
Okay.
It could.
Oh, you guys.
Okay, so it looks like this thing's making exactly the numbers that we expected from when we were tuning it up, so this is a solid baseline. And it says 752 horsepower and 625.3 pound-feet of torque. Look at that torque curve, super flat.
Wave tuning. It's got one torque peak, drops a little bit, and comes back into the next one. That means it's happy.
Now we're gonna go in and throw all those air cleaners on. I think we're not gonna tune the carburetor with every air cleaner, no matter how restrictive it is.
Unless you want to be here next week.
Right, because not only is it gonna take forever, but I think it'll still show a comparative analysis of which one is bad, which one is good. But the question is, if it's restricting airflow, will it slow down the air through the carburetor and pull less fuel anyway?
To a point, but at some point it's kind of like having the choke closed if it's
exactly.
it's bad enough.
That's true. But the other thing that people need to understand about it, though, is it may get richer, and we may see less power than you would if you leaned it back out. But the filter is still garbage.
It's still restricted.
Right, so it's still giving us a comparative analysis of all the filters that we're running with.
It's a bolt-on choke.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that.
All right, so that was our baseline. Now what we're gonna do is just run into the dyno, run one of these at a time. We're gonna blast through them all and give you all of the results at the end. This is gonna be good. How much power will each one kill? We're starting off with a dual snorkel with one snorkel taped off.
Wow! Wow! Wow!
I thought the 8-inch round one was gonna kill 80. This just killed 100.
That's amazing. That killed 100 horsepower. What happens when we untape that second snorkel? significant difference.
That was 50
That's
horsepower.
pretty good.
Not significant enough.
Not enough. No, it's still absolute trash.
It's still way better than a single snorkel, though.
I'll give you that.
You really have to let me flip the lid.
Okay, go flip
Every
the lid.
kid wants to flip the lid on their stock air
All
cleaner.
right, go flip the lid.
So we flipped the lid on the Stalker, and then it was time to test the aftermarket air cleaners.
I've always loved the look of these air cleaners.
I know.
They just look so cool.
Really.
Yeah.
Now we're going 70s style with velocity stacks. We're gonna try them both open and filtered.
It's got a foam filter with metal on both sides so it doesn't suck the foam in.
That's restrictive. Can't see any daylight through it.
Now we're gonna rip through some testing of a huge variety of standard round air cleaners, flat bases, drop bases, paper filters, K&Ns, and even those filtered lids.
This is a flat base, so when you switch over to a drop base like this, it actually lowers the whole air cleaner on the carburetor, and that's going to provide more hood clearance. And you can see the shape of this drop fits perfectly around the Holley carburetor.
We saw some really interesting trends when we started using these K&N filtered lids, and so we used tape to isolate what was really working, the lid or the filter itself. After a day testing all of these different combinations, we decided to go to the salad bowl. We noticed that anything that we could do to flow air straight down the carburetor was making more power. So we took the salad bowl, cut a hole in the bottom of it, and stuck the K&N filtered lid in the top of it.
Oh, not quite. Ah, come on.
That was so close.
I think that we learned some general stuff though. One, flat base is always better than a dropped base for like a 14x3 round air filter. That was pretty good. We saw that airflow down the carburetor is always better than across the carburetor.
Absolutely agree.
That was pretty cool. Size matters.
Right.
When you're making 750 horsepower, definitely that 14.4 is better than the 14.3. And then there was the whole thing with that filtered top, which I think really goes to show that direction down the carburetor is more important. You put the filtered top on with an open filter elsewhere and it doesn't work, but you let it do its own thing and it's big. To me, that was a pretty huge thing. One thing I wanted to do is show you how this applies to you even if you don't have a 750 horsepower engine. And so we've assigned a power number that we feel each one of these filters is capable of. And here's how we did it. We took the black line here, which is no filter whatsoever, and we compared it to the dyno curve with each filter. And at the point at which the filter starts to become a restriction, it starts to make less power. But below that point, it's about the same. So that tells us that is the point at which that filter is not restricting horsepower. And at the crossover, in this case, it's 650. And so we would estimate that that filter is not a restriction up to 650 horsepower. And that's really rough because different engines can use a different amount of air if the VE is worse than this one, but it'll give you an idea. Okay, Dulcich, ready to rank them?
Take them from the top.
Oh man, I'm gonna take it from the bottom.
Okay. Worst to best.
Number 19. Killing 145 horsepower, the 6.5 by 2.5 little dinky guy. We figured that thing's worth maybe only 300 horsepower. Number 18 is the single snorkel Mopar Scoop with one snorkel taped off. That killed 95.8 horsepower. 17, that foam velocity stack killed 72.4 horsepower. Our estimation is that it can only support about 300. The next biggest turd in 16th place is the Fly's Eye, which killed 71.1 horsepower. It probably can support 350. The dual snorkel Mopar comes in 15th place. It only killed 53.1 horsepower. As if that's okay. We think it can support maybe 390 horsepower. Next up is the 10 by 1.25, which actually surprised me in that it only killed 33.5 horsepower, but overall, you really only want to use that on about a 350 horsepower engine. Next is 13. This is the one that really taught us that the dropped base is always worse flowing than a flat base. But with the K&N filter and a filtered lid, this combo only killed 18.8 horsepower. But it's probably capable of 650. Next is the 14 by 3 with a K&N filter with a dropped base. It killed only 12.7 horsepower. Oh, we get to the Dulcich favorite, the Mopar dual snorkel with a flipped lid. Even with a paper element, this only killed 11.9 horsepower. That's pretty cool. Finally, we hit the top 10. In 10th place, The flat base 14x3 with a Fram paper filter killed 10.1 horsepower and can probably support 640. Number 9, the B&B high flow assembly with a big drop in it with a Can-N filter in it killed 8.9 horsepower. Number 8, a 14x3 round with a flat base, a Can-N filter, and the filtered lid killed 7.2 horsepower. But then in 7th place, when we put a solid lid on that same combination, it only killed 6.6. At this point, we're getting into the filters that really barely killed any power at all. They're all in the range of testing variants. They're all really good, but we're still gonna name winners. Number 6 was a mind blower. We taped off a 14x3 filter, and with the Can-N filtered lid on the top, only killed 3.5 horsepower. It was actually worse when we took the tape off. Number 5 is a flat base, a solid lid, and a taller 4-inch Can-N filter. It only killed 1.2 horsepower. In other words, nothing. Surprisingly, 4th place goes to the open combination. No air filter at all. That means the top 3 all made more power than an open filter, although only by a tiny, tiny bit. In 3rd place, the Can-N Velocity Stack added 0.9 horsepower. That's testing variants. What that tells you is it's just as good as no air filter at all. Really good. I'd much rather drive around with that on my boat than open. In 2nd place, our sentimental favorite and the absolute highlight of the show, and something that really trained us a lot about the direction of airflow, the Salad Bowl gained 3 horsepower. Oh, not quite!
Salad Bowl's the king.
And it's handsome.
The next time you have someone in here running an air filter and they're making 749, they want to make 750.
Bring out the salad
just be
bowl.
like, hold on.
Yeah.
Salad bowl and filter lid.
I think it's all about the direction of the air. It's why velocity stacks work. It's all about directing it straight down the carburetor and not making it change directions going in there. And finally, in the number 1 spot with no filter at all, a velocity stack feeding the Holley carburetor actually added 5.7 horsepower. That was the 2nd greatest test we've ever done.
What was the greatest?
Well, the header bash, of course.
Oh yeah, that was hard to beat.
This is such a close second. I think the only thing left to say is, which one would you take home? Zero shocker there.
Really?
You can always flip the lid, right?
Right.
It's like the ultimate universal air cleaner.
It's versatile.
I have to go with the old standard, the 14-incher with the tall Can-N.
Good choice.
This move, right through the eye all the way to the stud.